Max McFarlane, my gracious host, Tyler Jacklin, here for another amazing set review. What we have is Aetherdrift, which is not in the first slide, but I said it out loud now, so we're all on the same page. It'll be on the thumbnail on the YouTube video, hopefully. Anyways, before we get started, if you do have any interest in the cards we show you today, make sure to go to mechagames.com for any of your single.ca.
Canada, what's up? Represent.
Anyways, for any of your single needs, we will be having a pre-release. Hopefully we'll get the video up before that happens. We would love to see you come down and join us. And then, before we start showing off the cards, how do you feel about the set, Tyler?
You know what? I'm ready to speed off, sling some shells around, demolish some princesses and apes. That's what's happening, right?
So
that's what this set is.
I have it here on the World Wide Web. That's more the vibe we're getting. Less so Mad Max. There is a little bit of it, but it's more so like a Mario Kart-esque vibe to it.
Yeah.
But
fighting over gasoline on this one. Next set.
It's in the set too.
Oh.
They can't really, settle down, I guess. Anyways, to start us off, we're going to have a couple of groupings for this preview. We have our Wowzers cards, cards that I feel or we feel will kind of be a mainstay in formats, primarily standard and modern. Cards that kind of have a very high power for the cost, or effects that kind of can really bring out the power they bring to the table. Below that we have cards of interest, so not so much top tier, but still cards that could fit into multitudes of decks, and maybe even kind of give us some new archetypes to play around with. After that we have noteworthy cards, cards that probably won't, be that impactful, but might be maybe some fun additions to some maybe not so popular decks maybe, but they could see some play hopefully. Cards to keep in mind are cards that probably won't see play right away, but with future sets coming out, there could be something to kind of bring them back to the limelight. Cards good together is kind of just packages that if separated aren't that good, but when you bring them together can kind of shine in their own specific ways. The one I missed over, bait cards, are cards that I would suggest personally, this isn't my, I'm not professional, I would sell if you unpack them immediately. But if you like them, keep them. And if you want to guess what they are, leave a comment and whatnot. And then at the very end,
get that prediction out there.
Yeah, get that. Let's bait some engagement, as you do on these websites. Anyways, and then we have pickups. So these are cards that me or Tyler feel that we'll be picking up from the set.
Yeah, if you open them, hit me up. Message me.
On what?
I don't. Put it in the comments.
Like me or them?
Yeah, put it in the comments.
Okay.
Engagement, man.
Start off, Wowzer cards. One of the I feel is going to be one of the most impactful is Ketremoose, the new Dawn. So it has that God text, where it isn't a creature until it kind of hits requirements, which is...
Until you have, it's kind of like Threshold, but in exile, 7 cards in exile.
It's like Kicker, but delayed.
Yeah. Notably, it can be anyone's exile, so if you exile your opponent's creatures, or their graveyard, anything like that.
Or if you, that one card where you can mulligan, but you exile it.
Oh, Serum
Powder, yeah. You can just
turns it on right away. What's a 3-mana 4/4? Menace, lifelink, indestructible. Just attacks, blocks right away.
Yeah. So out of all the formats, I'd probably say Modern's the most applicable for this card. There's still some decent play in Standard. It's immune to board wipes. Whenever you exile a card in the graveyard or on the battlefield, draw a card, lose a life. So your Leyline Bindings now cycle, Solitudes now cycle. They can really just give you that huge amount of board advantage, card advantage, and just like a 4 minutes lifelink indestructible can really just put a lot of pressure, especially with board wipes too being very important. Like the standard metagame, this kind of just powers through like it's nothing, and you have a wide board for this to kind of get in there.
So a lot of powerful card advantage spells in Standard right now, so I'm not sure this one's going to quite keep up, but most notably in Modern, it is an Orzhov kind of value engine coming at a time where one of the first times that an Orzhov mid-range deck is really making big splashes in the format, and seems like it might have some staying power, especially against some of the other big decks right now. And I've even seen people cooking up, there's some potential comboing with this card as well, with like Psychic Frog and Dark Blast, being able to loop, limited by your life because you're losing a life and you're drawing a card, but you can make a really, really big frog and kill your opponent with a big flying Psychic Frog on as early as turn 3 even, if you curve it out.
There's also a very interesting combo you can do with it, where you can have 3 O-ring effects. You can cycle them until you draw your whole deck out, which is probably not going to be that big of an effect that we'll see kind of widespread, but if you still, for whatever reason, play Enchantress in 2025, you can slap this in.
Probably better ways to build your deck.
But yet, here we are. On the next card, though, is Bloodghast. This is more so for the standard.
Yeah, not a new card, but new for the current standard.
Yeah, with a shiny gold border.
Yeah.
For those lucky few who crack it open. This, I feel, is one of the more slept-on, powerful cards. Doesn't really see that much play right now, just because there's not any graveyard decks that kind of work with it that well. But with some other cards we got from the set, there's some new spice to kind of mix in with it, and Standard has a lot of good effects to kind of play around with this. We have an Aristocrats deck that's kind of popping up with this, which is Orzhov.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some rogue decks that definitely might like this, or I don't know if there's maybe some room for like, even maybe not now, but in the future, like a Rakdos aggro deck or something like that, where this can later on keep coming back, and we'll have haste later on in the game. And also notably, Bloodghast is not yet Pioneer legal, so of the set, will be in that format as well. How much Pioneer is getting played, because there's no competitive season, but come in a year or whenever Pioneer comes back around, this is a card that is a decent chance you'll see.
And it's just, especially with MH3, there's a lot of good effects with it. We have Flare of Malice.
True.
Where just like sacking for free can get rid of like the huge threats we've been seeing pop up. Birthing Ritual, another one. So kind of getting this, front and center for modern plays again.
Or even just Faithless Looting. Cast your looting, discard this, play a land, comes back, turns your looting into card advantage.
It's a very, resilient card. I hope we see more of it. And then Market Back Walker, a long lineage of XX creatures that come with counters and do things. This one draws you cards, which is, as we all know, a very strong effect. Unfortunately, the deck that would kind of just slam this in right now, which would be Hardened Scales, has been kind of on the lower tier of playability right now with a lot of the Order Whip effects.
Yeah, Wrath of the Skies has been particularly a brutal include. Though it's not a card that maybe sees a ton of play right now, but you are seeing artifact combo decks like Grinding Breach at the top of the format, so there's a lot of artifact hate, especially cards like Stony Silence, which can be really, really brutal for the Hardened Scales players. But Market Back Walker is going to do a lot for the resiliency of these decks, especially into the board wipes for their artifacts. Is it enough to bring it at the top of the meta? Probably not, but it's going to be a really fun card for those players.
It's just, the problem with Hardened Scales is you play so many artifacts and enchantments that the viability and the survivability is that kind of gets really hampered. it's good as a dark horse deck, something that you don't really prepare for. You can kind of slip in and then get big results.
An F&M mini boss.
Yeah. But when it comes to being top tier, you'll just start seeing matchups where people decide in like 3 Wrath of Skies, Force of Vigor. The list goes on how to kneecap this deck. But hopefully, Market-Back Walker can give us some juice to hopefully see some play for a little bit more. On to the next one. On the Verge of Greatness, we have the full 10 cards now for Verges. Of course, this means Verges that tap for only 1 color, so the full set,
Technically, you could have 20.
So when Magic is really kind of out of ideas for dual lands, we'll see those pop up.
I'd like to see a full 20 of these Verges. I think they're a really great design space.
Probably not for like our rotation we have right
maybe
now.
not. Yeah. It might take a few years, but like you have Sunbillow Verge, taps for a white. If you have a Mountain or Plains, taps for a red. You could do the flip of it where it starts on red, then adds white later. But these are going to be really, really great in Standard. They're already kind of the first half of them are already kind of everywhere. Really great for mana bases, especially those like 3-color mana bases, which are a little rough depending on exact combinations. Decks like Esper Pixie that's doing really well is really going to love to see these. And even your 2-color decks like Golgari Midrange is going to be really great in mana fixing. Yeah, a lot of the Boros aggro decks have been kind of more fringe compared to Gruul, partly because they haven't had a Verge. And you just end up with more awkward lands in your hand sometimes. It's hard to find those white pips sometimes. All of that's going to get a lot easier in Standard.
Yeah, so on to the next one. So this isn't, I'd say, as impactful potentially as the ones we've seen before. These are more so just for the Start Your Engines effect. For those of you who don't know, Start Your Engines is whenever a card comes in with that text, you get a speed emblem essentially.
Yeah.
That starts at 1, and then after that, every time you deal combat damage or your opponent loses life on your turn, it goes up by 1. This does include your turn.
Yeah, I think it's your opponent loses life on any turn, right?
No, only your turn.
Is it only your turn?
Yeah. So this means that it starts at 1, so you can, for some whatever reason, deal 1 damage the same turn it comes down to get to 2. Then we need to get 2 more to get that max speed, which would let these effects we see at the bottom of these cards.
Yeah. These are all great ways to start your engine, to start you on your speed track. These are maybe more things to be looking out, especially the common and uncommon one, in your limited pools, whether that be draft or sealed, just in that a lot of the time you're maybe not doing anything turn 1 and you can play one of these, start your engine, or you might not have a creature that starts your engine right away, but you can play one of these lands, get that going, deal a little bit of damage, start racking up your speed, and then when you draw one of your payoffs for your speed, you're already ready to go there. Think if you end up in a place where you're playing a lot of those payoffs, these lands are going to be quiet little sleeper hits in your deck, especially if you're just like 1 or 2 colors.
Especially the uncommon one. We've seen Arena Glory in Modern really have like a huge impact on giving your huge creatures haste. So making those kind of delayed effects happen immediately can really pump a card to new heights. So having an Arena Glory for 1 extra mana might be able to make some decks be a lot more impactful with their top end. We will see. It's a very hard to kind of identify good or bad effects, I feel personally. And then, if any card's going to bring dinos to the forefront in Standard mainly, it would be a 3-5 for that. It's just a Lord as well. For stats, it's probably some of the best stats we've seen for a while. And
they did give us a 3-mana 6/6 dinosaur in Ixalan. Now it gets I think it gets stunned or doesn't like untap
If you don't
properly.
have a dinosaur with it, it becomes stunned when you attack.
Yeah. But it's kind of in that similar space, and people were having some, you know, a range of success with like a gruel rather, like dinosaur build. This is something that could add to that, especially now that we have Llanowar elves. You now can play 8 3-drops that play off the elf on turn 2. So potentially something there. If you're a Timmy, you like those beatdown strategies. At the very least, it's an upgrade for what's a fun kind of rogue deck in the format.
And you know, Lord still, you know, especially like the huge stats we see on the dinosaurs already. You know, this could really just bring the deck back in like a new way, and just give a lot of pressure to those dino decks you might see pop up in standard again.
Not the greatest tribe for this kind of a Lord effect, just because the more creatures you have of that type, the better that value is, and it's more of a slam 1 or 2 big creatures kind of tribe. But you know, every little bit counts for sure, and 5/4 for 3, nothing to scoff at.
Mm-hmm. And then Treasure's Insight is probably one of my top cards of the set personally. It's effect we've been seeing pop up a lot more, where when it enters, you mill 4 cards, you can return an artifact, creature, or land card, and then whenever one or more artifacts and or creatures leave your graveyard, gain a life. The mill effect probably isn't the best we have for either modern or standard. Bailmerk lets you get anything in your graveyard, so
Any creature.
Yeah,
Any creature in your graveyard.
So stuff that you kind of had died previously, or you milled over with other effects and you bring it back, where this kind of only you get the 4. But this also does give you artifacts as well and lands. So if we see any big artifact decks that want to mill, this could be, you know, a nice little addition to it. And just getting your lands for, you know, that turn 3 or 4 play is also very important sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty comparable to like Modern's Malevolent Rumble, where 1 and a green, sorcery speed, you mill 4 cards. Malevolent Rumble is any permanent. This is close to any permanent. Like you can't get itself, but neither can Rumble. You can't get other enchantments or planeswalkers though, but still pretty close. Different upside, and Malevolent Rumble refunds you that mana that you can even use on another turn with a spawn token. With this, you get that life gain, which is maybe not as like generically powerful as that mana back, but for a deck like Modern's Yawgmoth, this does let you like sack creatures and be life neutral when you do that.
Yeah, so for your
with your Young Wolf specifically, and then yeah, you can, if you have Yawgmoth, 2 Young Wolves, you played one of these to dig for one of your combo pieces earlier, you can just draw your deck because you gain a life for every life that you end up spending with those Young Wolves. Or even if you have one Young Wolf and you're just sacking creatures and doing kind of looping the Young Wolf that way, it's half as much life, I believe. So potentially better than Rumble in that deck. It's something that's probably worth testing out.
I'd say probably beats out Bailmerk. Problem is you can't search for it.
It's true.
But Bailmerk is 5 mana, so you're not really gonna do that every single game. This also gets artifacts, so if your Agatha's Soul Cauldron, you can bin that with it and say you're Grist, bring that back. It still does hit Grist, which is kind of a fun little interaction.
Grist is a creature in the graveyard.
I kind of wish they did the Grist effect for more insect stuff in the set. I thought that would be pretty cool, but it is a very
yeah, it gets. I can't think of anything that this misses that Rumble doesn't get in like typical Yawgmoth decks, unless you're playing like a Birthing Ritual build or something like that, where you have more enchantments, or maybe some sideboard pieces that it might miss depending on what you're playing.
Also, for the Soul Trader combo, this lets you go neutral.
True.
So my little pet deck is, very happy to get this card.
Pretty similar kind of combo style to Yawgmoth, where you're paying a life to sack something and you're trying to loop that creature.
And another thing is, once you start getting multitudes, this really gets out of hand. My deck, you just instantly go into infinite life. Yawgmoth start going up a life. so that the young wolf combo line can actually get you out of situations that you might not enjoy being in. So I would really keep your eye out on this card. I'd probably pick this up before it spikes potentially.
Yeah, might be a few dollars.
On the next one, cards of interest. So once again, these aren't haymakers, but these have a lot of potential and can be very powerful cards in their own rights. First one, March of the World Ooze. 6-man enchantment is very pricey, but making every creature you control a 6/6. And whenever opponent tries to interact with you on your turn, you make a 3/3, which is going to be a 6/6 if this is not dealt with. The only really potential I see is bringing back elf decks. So that could be an option. This makes the tie bars or your other pump effects not as mandatory to have, and just having a card that lets you force your opponent to just feed into your deck as you try to combo off again and again till eventually you just overwhelm them is a very strong effect.
Yeah. You also have a couple of the Gear Hulks, which are both pretty high value. Their costs are a little restrictive, like you need double of 2 different kinds of pips, which means probably not seeing them outside of 2-color decks. But pretty powerful ETB effects of these 2 guys. I'm particularly interested to see how much Oil Deep Gear Hulk sees some play. You have seen this kind of effect on Vidillion Click, which has been like an all-star of the past. Not a card that really sees much play in like Modern so much anymore, but this Gear Hulk maybe will find its way into some Dimir mid-range shells in Standard, which is traditionally a really powerful archetype. Lifelink Ward 1 on your 4/4 is going to give you a lot of staying power against more aggressive decks, be able to grind really well, and then never underestimate the ability to look at your opponent's hand. It's always a powerful effect. It's perfect information about what your opponent's got going on, and if there's any problems, you can make them cycle it away.
Yep, so this also hits lands. So for the most part, you probably won't see that, but your Titan decks, the odd land deck that we see pop up in Standard time to time.
Sometimes your opponent's hand is bad without a land.
It's it's deceiving in how strong it can be sometimes. So, and also just sometimes just seeing like a halfway good card that you don't really care about, but just making get rid of it for a new card is not that bad either. There's also Bright Glass Gear Hulk. It is a 4/4 first strike trample, so it's a very aggressive threat without the extra text. But getting your your combo pieces that cost 1, the enchantments that you would just want to get into the field as fast as possible, and just making sure you have a multitude of ways to get that out. There is enchantment lands and artifact lands as well that you can also get as well in case you need to get those. So this has a lot of versatility. There's a lot of small artifacts that we saw in Modern. One of the biggest ones I can think of is the Mox we just got. So just getting 2 mana off of this and just getting set up for that. Very strong. But I'm interested
you can
in seeing
Urza Saga. You can get there's a lot of a lot of 1-mana creatures that are really good. Also applied Guide of Souls. This is at 4 mana. It's maybe a little bit too high on the curve for a lot of Modern decks, but like we have been seeing cards like Ranger Captain of Eos see play, which does tutor for 1 creature. Similarly, though its secondary effect's a lot better right now. It is 3 mana, but this is something to think about, something to keep an eye out. There's some like Selesnya kind of like Ocelot Pride builds that are maybe interested in this, depending.
And if you really think about it, we get 2 Boggles and 2 enchantments for your Boggles. So this could be the comeback we never saw coming. So keep your eyes out.
Boggles might be back, and if it is, I will be playing Shalodrid's Edict in every deck.
That's where you get the second Boggle.
They never expect the second Boggle.
Exactly. And first place don't matter the price. These are cards that you're gonna have to put a little gas in to get it to the finish line, but they will get you there. The Speed Demon. a 5 mana 5/5 flying trample non-hasted creature with start your engines, get your end step. You draw X cards and lose X life, where X is your speed. So this will cap out at 4 cards, but that is 4 cards in your hand at your end step, which is very important. So this will immediately at least cycle, potentially even more.
Yeah, the fact that it draws at least 1 card means that you don't really have to play any other start your engine cards, which is a good thing. It's going to be hard to build like a competitively viable constructed deck that's heavily in on start your engines, but these kinds of cards that you don't need to play a ton of support, or like you don't have to play weaker cards that to help build up your speed or anything like that, just make the mechanic more playable, more likely to kind of escape the limited environment. There is room for 5 mana kind of value creatures in your Black X mid-range and slower decks in Standard. Will this make the cut? Time will tell, but it's something to keep your eye on. It is a demon for Unholy Annex, which is definitely seeing a little bit less play than it was in Standard, but again, like that's not nothing. More demons for that card is always good.
This card doesn't kill you in 4 turns. It could, but not always.
True. And if you have Unholy Annex, that racks up your speed while you have a demon, because it will start losing your opponent life.
You know, the lines here are unimaginable.
Yeah.
But
only a mid-range player could figure that one out.
Come back to me, John. Anyways, the last ride, 1 mana 13/13 non-creature vehicle that gets -X/-X, where X is your life total.
Where have I seen this before?
Not anywhere that I've.
No.
This is the first effect I've ever seen in my life like this, not gonna lie. Of course, I am lying to you and you, the viewer. This is your Death Shadow as a card. So, some key notes about Death Shadow. This doesn't die when you play it turn 1, which is a very important fact because Death Shadows are cards that you do not want to see in your opening hand.
Yeah, unless you have 3 Street Wraiths.
And it's just...
Or more, 4 even.
And like the problem with decks like that is you have to put a lot of resources into losing life, or this can just sit there. It also has the ability to just draw you a card for 3 mana and 2 life. So eventually it will just get itself there through chipping yourself down. It has a crew 2, which isn't that much.
Pretty easy
really.
to do.
And also this doesn't get board wiped or kill that sorcery speed, which is a very important thing for cards like this. Where they sit on your board, you get board wipes, you just play a 2 cost, and you just swing in for 7, 8. We have Mosswood Dread Knight in Standard right now, which is a very good combo with this. It makes you lose life through drawing cards, and it has that toughness to kind of, or that power, crew it and let it swing in. And it's a very annoying threat to deal with because it just comes back over and over again. Also, we did just see a Bloodghast that has 2 power, so
It's true.
truly the options for this ride are endless.
This card's like somewhat reminiscent of Reckoner Bankbuster, which Neon Dynasty just rotated out, but that card got very much banned, and for good reason. Having this kind of early value piece you can play that you can attack with. Now this doesn't attack as early. It's not as generically good because it's not all colorless. You do have to pay 2 life to draw cards, so there's definitely a lot more restraint, I think, with this card. But on the back side, when the game gets late, when you've paid a lot of life drawing those cards, you start swinging with a pretty big creature. Might be able to make it into some decks in Standard. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, another thing is, even in Modern, you do have Reign of Filth, so you just pay yourself down to 1 life, hopefully don't have any interaction whatsoever, crew it, swing for 12, and whatever happens, happens. So
Never Lightning Bolt.
exactly, that card is not real. It does not exist. You made up those words.
It cannot hurt you.
And then on to our last guy, which is not demonic in any way. Does not cost any black mana.
Not legendary or mythic.
Not even gold.
Oh.
Sorry about that. But
You got etched.
it is a we do what we can here. It is a shark fire hit that whenever you discard one or more cards with that many counters on this creature. We've seen a Rakdos Hollow One deck pop up in Modern recently. Comes in here and there. One of the cards it's playing, I think, is Aetherdrift right now.
Yeah.
And that deck really wants to be red, so getting rid of a clunky black drop that really can't, sustain itself, especially with your Detective Phoenixes, and just getting another 1 mana 1/1 that likes seeing cards get discarded and can get a hand really fast and not lose out of a power like Flameblade Adept can.
Yeah. And Flameblade Adept is already kind of their premium one drop. You probably like it more than Nethergoyf most of the time. Though Nethergoyf has that kind of more staying power, it's more resilient in a sense, but it's weak to those graveyard hate. Hollow One, in a lot, like the card Hollow One itself and Flameblade Adept, don't really need the graveyard. Even if there's a Ley Line of Void, a Rest in Peace in play, you're still discarding cards, even if they're going to exile. So you still can trigger those. You can still cast Hollow Ones for reduced costs or free. And just being more resilient in the way that, like, the very common graveyard hate that we see in Modern, and just not caring about that so much, if at all, makes this card maybe a full replacement for Nethergoyf, or at least a card to consider. And definitely has a little bit more kind of staying power than Flameblade Adept does, in that it keeps the pump to it rather than being temporary, even though it doesn't have any evasion like Flameblade.
We do see Detective Phoenixes pop up. So just being able to put 4 of those in your deck and not care about Nethergoyf, how to chew through those.
And if you give this guy flying, it's going to be a big beater.
So it does have cycling, so seeing this late game, especially after your opponent, get border wiped or like exile your graveyard, you just shuffle away and hope you hit big.
Or if you have a Hollow One in play, it kind of goes mana neutral with it, if you want to cycle it away first. Or if you have other Makos in play or other Flameblade Adepts in play, just cycling for 2, it's a really nice upside. You can never go wrong with it.
And small thing too, Arena Glory is a very powerful card. This can be hit by it without being the graveyard, which kind of is a little bit more, kind of umph to it. But without further ado, high performance models, these cards get you the distance with that sleek design, and they also just do it, with a fraction of the cost. Starts off with Ovia, I'm saying that right, Automech Artesian. Each creature that's attacking one of your opponents has trample. For those commander players, that is, your opponents have trample now as 2 for not you, which is kind of interesting. But the real effect we're here for is you may put a creature or vehicle card from your hand on the battlefield. You put an artifact onto the battlefield this way, put 2 1/1 counters on it. So things to note: you can put an artifact creature, you'll still get it, which is of interest. For some decks, this probably isn't like a scales card, but for those weird people that just want to do that, you are allowed to. But this is probably going to make you feel an odd thing. This is an interesting card for Goryo's Vengeance.
Oh, that's not where I thought you were going. That is an interesting thought, yeah, like you can get around like graveyard hate if you want. Kali of the Vast probably does it a bit better. Like you can play like a Mardu build, Arena of Glory, and put something into play right away, like the same turn. Having to untap with a 4-drop to get really any value is probably too slow for Modern. But maybe an intrigue. Oh, I get. Yeah,
So
you can do the same thing with Kalia, though.
So the problem with Kalia, though, is you get to swing with it. So getting Kalia to combat can be the problem sometimes, where this is just comes in.
Yeah, if they don't have anything for the Gorios, you can tap right away. Yeah. Your,
7-drop.
your main problem is slotting green into that deck is probably going to be too hard. The deck already is getting pulled by every color except by green right now, and 4 colors probably too greedy of a mana base already.
But yeah, you could put in Malevolent Rumble.
It's the problem with the Rumble is you can't pick up things like Goryo's that you mill over. So, like, I think the deck probably needs to be Mardu or Grixis right now.
You know what? We'll just
Hard
do
to
the
say.
Spike video, I guess.
Speaking of Spike, repurposing Bay.
What does it do, Tyler?
For our fans of Birthing Pod, repurposing Bay for 2 and a blue, an artifact. You pay 2 and tap it, sacrificing another artifact, and you get to search your library for an artifact that costs 1 more than what you sacrificed. Only could do this as a sorcery, as a slight kind of downside.
They love slapping that on cards now.
Yeah, just trying to rein in some of the power of this card here, but it is a very powerful piece. Aspiring Spike has recently been playing, bringing back some Oswald Fiddlebender, which does this sort of effect, but it's on a creature. This being an artifact means it's more resilient than a creature is. Oswald you have to untap with. This you can tap the turn it comes into play. You can do silly things with like affinity cards, like, you know, have it play a Mirror Enforcer, which technically costs 7, even though you didn't spend 7 on it, and then turn it into an 8-drop Sundering Titan, Cityscape Leveler, or even like an 8-drop into something like Portal to Phyrexia and other big bombs. Notably, like, Birthing Pod is a card that has been banned in the past and is currently banned in Modern. It might be fair in Modern right at this point, but another one of these effects this time for artifacts is something not to scoff at, something that will be built around, and depending on what cards get printed in the future as well, might do some really broken things.
We have a lot of mana acceleration for modern artifacts. Chrome Mox, going Ornithopter, Springleaf, Enigma Jewel from Lost Caverns, you know, one blue, tap, add 2 mana for activated abilities.
It does just activate this, right?
And, you know, once again, going, just playing, you know, like your Thought Monitor, getting it for like a Kappa Cannoneer, some other effects, and really just bring the hammer down on some decks. And it's an interesting card. Hopefully I get to see it played. And then we have Monument to Endurance. Whenever you discard a card, so this is not 1 or more, so you can get all 3 effects from 1. Simple, discard 3 cards for whatever situation. And then you can choose one that has been chosen this turn. Draw a card, create a treasure, each opponent loses 3 life. So we just saw Marauding Mako, which is, you know, lovely discard, and this is a very good card to kind of keep the pace on those effects, and also can just put your opponent on a clock, which is losing 3 life every turn. This isn't only your turn as well, so if you have ways to consistently discard, like once per turn, get a cookbook, you can really just start hammering down on your opponent.
Yeah, it's just a card advantage engine. Not much more to say about it. Sometimes it casts Strike Rich, sometimes it casts whatever draw card is. Sometimes it Lava Spikes. And all while you're casting powerful cards like Faithless Looting or cycling a Street Wraith or anything like that. Just free extra value. Well, 3 mana. And then it's free. Might even buy some back with those treasure tokens.
And for those weird people that still play Living End, this costs 3 mana. It doesn't get hit by it, so...
It's true.
So that's probably never going to happen, but anyways. Then noteworthy cards, so not as strong, but could see some play in some fringe decks. To start off, we have Sky Serpent Seeker. Simic 1/1 Flying Death Touch, so a very sticky body that people do not enjoy swinging into, with our first Exhaust ability. So Exhaust, for those people who don't know, is once per card essentially, or per that card ability that you can activate, you can affect, for as long as that card kind of stays in the same spot. So if it dies, comes back, or you exile it, bring it back, or you bounce it, bring it back. Essentially, if it leaves the field, comes back, you do it again. So your flickers and your whatnots can, kind of go ham with this. And then this says, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal 2 land cards. With those land cards onto the battlefield tapped. The rest on the bottom of the library in a random order. And then it gets a counter, which isn't really the reason you're playing this.
Nice little bonus, though. This is a card that you're going to love to see in Limited. If you're playing Simic and you're trying to ramp into big stuff, it's going to be a great card for that. You maybe even be able to find room in some standard options as well. We don't have any like huge ramp decks right now, but it's another card that maybe adds to it. 4 is a lot of mana, so I don't know how much this is going to escape Limited in that way. If it's 3 mana, maybe we're talking then. You are competing with cards like Overlord as a ramp spell, the green Overlord. Definitely going to be an awesome card in Limited if you're in the right colors. Outside of that, we'll see.
And then Hazret Godseeker. This is indestructible haste. It has the God effect where if you don't have max speed, this is not a creature essentially. But it also has a creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. Very good stats. If you have max speed, this thing is a menace immediately. But still a not bad aggro card for when you just want to get in with the card and then maybe pump it up or whatnot. It's just the max speed. Once again, we don't know how easy it is to get for certain decks.
My guess is max speed is going to be a tough ask on most of these cards in any constructed formats. So again, those cards like Speed Demon that just care about how much speed you have and kind of enable it themselves or kind of pay off right away are gonna be the better options. But again, it's something to think about. A 5/3 with indestructible that keeps swinging at you is a very scary thing to see.
And it's just the effect is lets you get under, and then if you pump it up, can lead to some fun and easy kills. So that is not something you kind of want to.
You can make the creature unblockable, and then Monster's Rage. If it's got prowess, those triggers, all that will still be unblockable. You just target it before any of that. Can get pretty scary.
And then Loot the Pathfinder, Magic's favorite force mascots. So for 5 mana, you get a double strike Vigilance Haste, 2/4, with 3 exhaust abilities. Green, add 3 mana. So and blue, draw 3 cards, and then red, deal 3 damage for 8 taps as well for all of those. This is a card you want to put in your Cauldron. This is a amazing soup for those Cauldron decks that just want to tap down creatures and use those abilities without paying 5 mana for a body. You can only do one of them at a time. So this could make some odd decks playable, but it's getting it into the group bin, getting it under a Cauldron, and having the creatures there to start using all those fun effects. And then the problem is you come up with them once. It's a very tall order to ask.
Yeah, this is maybe most notably a really cool commander card, like a commander specifically, and like I'm interested to see if anyone can make anything interesting, like something like competitive commander, CEDH. Like this, I think pretty clearly can be like a food chain deck where you can make infinite creature mana, and then you can play loot. All you need is 1 extra green mana, and then you can turn it into infinite mana of any color, and then you can with loot also draw your deck, kill all your opponents. If you play like flicker effects, which blue's pretty good at. Displacer Kitten is a crazy card, or just other blue flicker effects. You can go off further with him. I don't know if that's really going to break anything in the format, but it would be probably a pretty cool brew.
This is, as you said, like food chain. just getting like a squee food chain combo to set it up with this.
Or there's a blue mist something griffin. There's a blue creature that also can do it. So you're in the right color. You're in the exact colors you want to be.
The 2/4, and as long as your fun little food chain doesn't get touched, you're happy. But outside of that, if you're in your 60 card formats, anywho, writing in style, even in the afterlife. Salvation Engine. Just if we're only looking at limited, this is a bomb. This is gonna just start hammering into your opponent right off the bat. Just giving 2/2 to all your artifact creatures is a huge effect. And then whenever this attacks, let's bring back one artifact. No cost requirements, no finality counters, no ifs, ands, or buts, and just putting it into play is a strong effect. And Crew 6 seems like a lot, but if you have two artifact creatures that are 1/1s, you can crew it. So this is deceptively easy to crew, I feel.
Yeah. I think of these, the one that jumps out to me the most, Crypt Caller Chariot. Without having to crew it, it does something when you discard one or more cards. Normally create that many, so that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. They do enter tapped, but one of them does crew the chariot, so 5/5 with menace, which is pretty big. The fact that you're not limited to it just creating one per kind of discard outlet means that this can create a lot of zombies really quickly. Still a lot of mana at 4 mana, but potentially like a top end value engine in like a standard discard deck. I don't think there's quite the best ways to discard in standard right now, but I mean, we're gonna have this card for the next few years in the format, so there's always cards to keep in mind if we get a good discard outlet, a good kind of value combo there.
Mm-hmm. And then the last of the three is Curse Cloth Wrappings. Another 4 mana artifacts. Zombies control get +1/+1, and then you can embalm a creature. For those people who don't know what embalm does, is you exile the creature as you cast it. It comes back as a 4/4 copy when you use at sorcery speed. So it's a good value card. It's a lot of restrictions. You don't get any reduction for these casts, but turning those 1/1 cards into 4/4s immediately, even 5/5s if the sticks around, can be very good.
Yeah, if they have an ETB trigger, you get extra value there as well beyond just getting that card back. Also, I think Embalm makes them a zombie.
Yes, it's a white zombie.
Yeah, so technically it's a 5/5 you get. A little more upside there to it.
So there's also a fun interaction with a very powerful card in Modern right now with Ocelot Bride. If you have the City's Blessing, you gain a life. You can copy itself, and you have 2. And it's just every time you embalm, you just get a whole lot of value with that Ocelot. It's
a lot of first strike and 5/5s.
Yeah, very scary. Ocelot Unite a 1/1 is a nightmare to deal with, but that's that. And then ability-based enjoyment. These are cards that the body is not that good. Usually, if you could get rid of the body, you wouldn't really mind, but still pretty good regardless. Start off, a 1-mana Merfolk. Deck saved, put it at the top of the tier list, wrap up Modern, we're good.
I don't think any mystery that Merfolk has been searching for a good 1-drop in a while for a long time. This isn't it. Sorry, Merfolk players.
It's 1 mana.
And you know what? The Merfolk players, they ask for too much. They got Harbinger of the Seas, which was, I think, a pretty crazy card to print.
1 mana.
It's true. But I think we're probably still a ways away from a good, modern playable 1-mana Merfolk.
Yeah,
maybe in Lorwyn or some distance.
Eventually, WotC will start running out of ideas, and they will probably have to.
They have to, right?
We're
going to get a good goblin
MH6,
one of these days.
They'll have to get something for MH6.
One of these days.
The exhaustibility, though, is still pretty good. Usually, you're probably just going to do this for 2 mana. Just put a counter on each Merfolk. So it's a lord on a stick essentially.
Even just for one mana, like when you get those island walking, like 2 or 3 merfolk, sometimes you're gonna find surprise lethal or turn a 3-turn clock and do a 2-turn clock.
Especially with
That's worthwhile, worth something anyways.
the gem you got from Ixalan, wherever you tap a non-token merfolk, you make a merfolk. So
True.
this is very well paired with that. You can put it under an Agathos, and then your merfolk essentially just infinitely make merfolk in a sense. And drawing cards when you're kind of playing a bunch of lands with this and you kind of run out of cards to play can be very good. There's also not through speed, so if you want to hold this off until your opponent's end step, refill your hand and kind of try to go off with that, it's not a bad idea. Once again, Merfolk is a very not in a good spot right now, so this might not be the shining chariot to bring it home. And then we have Web Strike Elite. The body doesn't matter, reach doesn't matter, 3 doesn't matter. You're cycling this 90% of the time, and it's a very good cycle, especially for modern right now. We have a lot of decks that like to play those 0 costs or whatever, artifacts, enchantments, or Urza Saga, Chromox, even like Pithing this can deal with kind of sneakily. This isn't a spell, so if those control decks that want to kind of shut you out, this can just get rid of those pretty fast.
It can be consigned to memory, which is somewhat notable depending on what you're playing, because it is a triggered ability, but it is still a 2-for-1 either way, where even if they counter it, because of cycling, you're drawing a card as well as having that destroy trigger.
If they do consign it, can't they replicate it?
Well, cycling's not a triggered ability. Cycling's an activated ability, if I'm not mistaken. So they can consign the destruction part. They can't stop you drawing the card, at least not with consign. Also notably, you can get this with Summoner's Pact for those Titan players, or if you're really crazy with it, those Neo brand players even. It's a green creature that's tutorable.
And it is an insect, so if you're ever playing like Chris deck, this can get you 2 insects.
And it's not nothing that you can, like, the decks that are going to want to play this are often going to be Green Sun decks. You can put this into play. It's a 2-mana 3/3. That's not nothing.
And
I've been killed by Yogg players just beating me down before, and this is overstated for the cost.
And your Bailnorks bring it back. Other effects like that can turn this to hand if that's really necessary. So there's a lot of variety to the play.
Yeah, your Rumbles or your Dredger's Insight that we're getting, they pick this up where they can't pick up instants and sorceries that do this kind of effect. You're a little bit more limited just on how big those artifacts you can hit are, but it's a potential tech or sideboard card that you might see around.
And then Transit Mage, so a 3-mana 2/2. That when this enters, you may search your library for an artifact card with mana value 4 or 5. Put it in hand, then shuffle. The kind of biggest deck that comes to mind with this is your Belcher deck. Belcher has been kind of shimmied into like a mono blue non-wizard deck, plays a lot of wizards. So getting Belcher in hand and having a flare of
Denial.
Denial.
Yeah, sacks to your Flare of Denials, which the deck already really wants to play. So yeah, turn 3, you can put Belcher into your hand. Turn 4 is when you threaten, typically. I don't know. It would be hard to do. I don't think there's a way for you to threaten Belcher before turn 4 anyways, because you need a Lotus Bloom in there somehow. Even with Tameshi, it has to be turn 4 because they have no way of playing Tameshi before turn 3. So this fits perfectly in the curve. It gets your kill card, Belcher. And yeah, the fact that it sacks to Flare of Denial, like any blue creature in a deck that's already playing 4 of those typically, means that this is going to curve perfectly. You're probably not fitting a full play set, but I'm sure 2 or 3 are going to slot in really easily to that deck and just be a good upgrade.
And like the small effect is it is a wizard. Flame Ignore has kind of been a card that kind of the lower tier of players' minds, but it's a very strong effect. And if you are playing Belters as a very heavy control deck right now, maybe putting the red in for you have.
The red splash might be tough, but it's always something to keep in mind. You're already splashing white, which is sometimes a little awkward, but always something to think about.
And then a graveyard shift, cards that enjoy the graveyard. Broodheart Engine is a Golgari artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 1, and then for 4 mana tap, sacrifice it, return to a creature or vehicle card from your grave to the battlefield, only at sorcery speed. So for those decks that, like reanimating, those zombified decks that we saw in standard kind of pop up here and there, having a nice little value engine that's slowly gonna get those cards into the bin for you to eventually bring back. This card is very good at doing that, and it's tricky to deal with. You're not really that sad when it dies, and just having a constant threat of just, oops, here's your big threat to kill the opponent is always nice to have.
Seems like a card I would love to play in limited, definitely. The Reanimator decks are always really fun and can be really powerful in that format, especially when your bombs are like reasonably castable. Those 5, 6, sometimes even 7 drops, and then when you also have these cards that can bring them back after they get removed, or if you have ways to discard or mill yourself, like this can just surveil one into the bin, and then you can immediately reanimate it on turn 4, even if you play this on turn 2 or 3. Gonna be a really fun card to play with there.
So Quag Feast is a 2-mana choose a creature, planeswalker, or vehicle, mill 2 cards, and destroy the chosen part. Its mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. So it's not your usual 2-mana kill it if it's not a fan or so, but for those graveyard decks that just want to fill the graveyard and want removal that kind of does it as well, is pretty good. Since it's planeswalkers and vehicles, which we don't really see that often on mono, like on kill shots, so having that kind of versatility, a huge swath of vehicles we are getting can actually matter sometimes. And the mill 2 isn't that bad, especially for like getting a kill if you already have the graveyard 2 and just getting more things in the bin for your future attempts at doing stuff.
Yeah, it means that at base level, it can kill a 2-drop, which is on turn 2, usually what you're doing. And then if you have other ways to get cards in the graveyard, it will quickly get higher from there. It not being an instant is kind of going to be, I think, a pain point for the card, and maybe the biggest limiter on it. But if you want to play like standard Zombify deck or something like that, potentially a good kind of 2-for-1 where you get to fill your graveyard while also interacting early. You also have Grim Bauble, a long line of artifacts and enchantments that do something when they enter. I think this is a design space WotC is playing with a ton, and you're seeing decks like Esper Bounce playing cards like this so they can repeat the effect. I think it's Nowhere to Run does this at 2 mana flash, -3/-3 instead of 2/2.
Your fun protection.
Yeah, stops ward and hexproof, which is probably still better than this. There's enough things at 3 toughness that you need to kill, and not having hexproof or ward is actually pretty big. There's a lot of really good cards that add that. So is this going to replace that? Probably not. Maybe it's a card you can also play alongside it. You have the upside of you can sack Grim Bauble to surveil 2, which is kind of reminiscent of what's the one drop that makes you discard?
Hopeless Nightmare.
Hopeless Nightmare. Reminiscent of that card.
And the one going B on the draw, especially with this card, isn't as bad, because usually if you're on the draw, no order run's probably going to have to deal with a lot more to kind of get that value, where this is just they play their one-drop aggro card, that kind of deals damage when it dies, and you just go -2/-2.
Yeah, just kill a Manifold Mouse, kill a Llanowar Elf, kill like Spyglass Siren. There's any number of one-drops that this will remove, no problem. After that, it might get a little awkward, but
It's probably a better tactic if either Grim Bubble or an Order Run can't kill the creature, just giving -2/-2 and just being able to see the top 2 cards, hopefully get to your answer, is a lot better. And then, I didn't really know what to name this, so I searched that up and got that emoji. Anyways, Gas Soul Thrill Roller, 3 mana, 4/2 vehicle. When it enters, becomes an artifact creature. That's trample haste, crew 2, and when you discard it, comes back. Or discard a card for 3 mana, it comes back. Finale counter. Once again, for those who don't know, finale is when this creature essentially dies, like it's exiled instead. So effects that kind of go around that can get rid of the finale counter, but you're not really going to see that in aggro decks that play red usually, so this is one and done. But 3 mana, 4/2 trample haste is a very good stat line, and you're not really gonna worry about this getting blocked because it's just gonna come back later eventually. This does kind of have some space to kind of punch with the card from Duskborn, which is
I'm not sure what you're...
Screaming Nemesis.
Right.
They are both 3 mana that kind of have that very aggressive threats. So these kind of have that same kind of space. You don't really want to have too many 3-drops in a red aggro deck, but just have a card that if you start drawing, like top decking your lands, come back and just get in there. And then Slick Imitator. So this is a start your engines card that when at max speed, sacrifice it, copy crit spell you control, so it can't really seal an opponent's spell. This is probably one of the more tricky ones to evaluate. That's huge potential. Start your engines on a essentially blue combo card is a huge ask. So getting to that max speed is going to be a lot.
Incredibly powerful payoff for max speed. Getting there. The fact that Start Your Engines doesn't always tick you up 1. It only starts you at 1. If you play another Start Your Engines card that doesn't tick you up, like something like Claim the Initiative did, maybe WotC design team has a little PTSD from designing that mechanic. Obviously it's been very problematic in constructed formats. So I think maybe a little bit too much restraint on this mechanic. I don't know if we're going to be able to get up to max speed reliably enough to play cards like this, but maybe down the road they print some more with it, or there's some good support that comes in incidentally in another kind of card, and you get to copy a spell, any spell.
Getting that second domination is what you can kind of use sometimes. And then, ta-da! Big cards! Who would have thought? Not I. It's like I made this. Anyways, Radiant Lotus, 6 mana, sacrifice one or more artifacts, choose a color. You target player, add 3 mana that chose a color for each artifact sacrificed this way. So this is, turning any artifact you have into Black Lotus. It is strong, 6 mana, huge ask, and tap ability, huger ask. And the question remains, you had the 6 mana, why didn't you just cast that card in the first place?
Having to ramp into your ramp is not a great dynamic. The decks that are getting to 6 mana quickly have much better things to do. They're casting Primeval Titan, and it's probably going to kill you that turn or the next. This card takes a lot more setup. I'm reminded a little bit of like Bootlegger's Stash back when New Capenna dropped. This card's probably better than Bootlegger's Stash in that I think it provides you more value than Bootleggers did. But I think it's a card that people are very excited about. That's probably not actually going to go anywhere, and it's probably going to be super overpriced because of that hype. And then I think it's going to crash.
Yeah, it's also just getting to 6 mana fast and then getting enough artifacts to have that payoff is already kind of tearing your deck in 2 parts. And also having, those big cards to spend it on makes it a problem. Is you're kind of having 3 ideas into one deck, and that's kind of not where you want to have your decks. It kind of just makes drawing only one part really bad, or just drawing them in the wrong order extremely bad.
On the other hand, the Aether Spark is a very interesting card. It's our first artifact Planeswalker equipment. It's 4 mana, starts at 4 loyalty. As long as it's attached to a creature, it can't be attacked. And whenever that equipped creature deals combat damage during your turn, notably it doesn't have to be to your opponent, just any combat damage, the Aether Spark gets loyalty counters equal to the damage dealt. You uptick +1 to attach the Aether Spark to a creature and give that creature a counter. -5 draws 2 cards. -10 adds 10 mana of 1 color.
So you could cast your Radiant Lotus and have 4 mana left over.
I think the Aether Spark, the abilities are maybe a little innocuous. -5 seems like a lot, but it starts at 5 loyalty because you're going to be upticking it right away. That creature can swing right away, so you're going to be above 5 loyalty, drawing 2 cards on your next turn. Like -5 draw 2 cards will be pretty powerful. There's not really any great archetypes that this slots into, and 4 mana is still a lot in Modern. Like Stoneforge Mystic is not the greatest anymore, but it would be very good with this, where it tutors it out. It can put it into play for half the mana, uncounterably. So maybe there's a fun hammer build, maybe. And this gives you a little bit of card advantage. If it does work out, if that deck can make it work, like card advantage to be able to keep presenting kills will make that deck better. Good enough to be tier 1, probably not, but I think this is a card that is maybe hard to evaluate without playing a little bit. It's going to appear in a fun brew. Is it going to make a huge difference competitively? Probably not.
Yeah, it's just another thing is you don't have the creatures to put that pressure with it. It's just getting to that 5 for the first time isn't bad. Getting to the second time, especially if you minus without getting any hits with it, it's pretty brutal. You just spent 4 mana for something that's kind of just sitting around.
And I think they were maybe a little bit. I think they showed a lot of restraint with that ultimate. 10 mana is nice, especially after you've drawn extra cards, so it might work out to be a bit better than I'm thinking. But I want my ultimate to be the payoff most of the time, and adding 10 mana is kind of setting up for payoff more than it is a payoff. So I kind of wish that did more, but I can understand not wanting to do like a game-ending ultimate or anything on a card that could potentially put a lot of loyalty on itself the turn it comes in.
Yeah, the problem is, as you said, mainly for a hammer deck. Hammer doesn't really usually need 10 mana to do stuff.
Yeah, but after you've drawn cards, you have a little bit more wiggle room. You might want that extra mana. Are you going to spend all of it every time? No. Are you going to ult this very often? Probably not. It will come up once or twice.
And then cards to keep in mind. So these cards probably won't be out the gate, huge staples and formats, but the abilities I feel can really add, some very powerful effects that decks kind of need that support in the future, maybe. Start off District Mascot, so 1 green for a 0/0, but comes with a counter, so it doesn't die. And then when this creature attacks, while it's saddled with the saddle 1 ability, put a counter on it, and then remove 2 counters from it with 1 green to destroy target artifacts. if we ever see a hardened scales effect for 1 or 2, or mainly 1, this is going to be pretty strong, because just going turn 1 with this, and then another drop on hardened scales, 1 drop with it, swinging in, gain to 3 is pretty good. And then after that, every swing with it while it's saddled gets you that strike target artifact ability. Once again, this kind of doesn't have any good spot right now, I feel.
It's a repeatable interaction, which is something. The fact that it's not like an artifact creature means hardened scales will have a tough time slotting it in, but like if you get this under a cauldron, it might put in some work. It's an option. It's a card out there.
Pit Automaton, so this is a little bit of an odd one, but giving you that 2 mana to spend on activated abilities, and then whenever you activate a exhaust ability, you can copy it. It can be very strong. The exhaust abilities we have right now aren't huge. Like, the most pilled ones would be probably the loot ones, but there is a chance we see exhaust in the future, and just having a way to copy that, or also just getting 2 mana for your activated abilities can be pretty strong in the right scenarios. But that's kind of just sit and wait, and hopefully it doesn't collect too much dust before it sees play. And then Grave Stalker is a 6 mana that costs 1 less for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard, cycling 2, and it's a 5/4. We've been seeing a lot of these effects pop up recently. Hollow Marauder, the Swarm from Bloomburrow. These are very strong cards. The problem I have with this kind of deck is if you only get these cards, your 6 mana reducers, and not the cards that fill your graveyard, you just kind of don't do anything. But we have Up the Beanstalk.
This guy does cycle too, which is nice, means it's not breaking your hand. This kind of card, these bombs with cycling for 2 or less ideally, showed up to Lord of the Rings, Oliphant, Troll of Khazad-dûm. What a time. But yeah, these are great limited cards, almost always. If you get like reanimation effects, like we've already kind of covered, they get even better. They're not bad early, and they're great in the late game. Just solid, common. Just like the next guy, like Magmakin Artillerist, another common card. Notably for Pauper, this is a card that you might want to play in like Cycle Storm, which is a deck that exists. This guy is a 3 mana 1/4. Whenever you discard one of our cards, he deals that much damage to each opponent, and you can cycle him for 2, which when you do, deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you can, if you just need to dig a bit deeper, you can always cycle him, but he will just kill your opponent when you do your little Cycle Storm turns. I'm not familiar enough with the deck of the format to know if that's going to break anything. Probably not. It'll probably be a reusable include somewhere, or at least something to try out.
And for those cards that you might see a huge discard card in the future, or just draw a bunch of cards, discard a bunch of cards, and instead of just having a 3 mana kind of potential, just play this out, discard 20 cards, kill your opponent, is something we could maybe see in the future. So I would keep it in your back pocket. And the cards good together. Truly cards that really like seeing each other in the field, or seeing each other when you can kind of play around with them. And the first ones we have are Afterburner Expert and then Draconautics Engineer. I will say Afterburner is probably another card I put in the lookout for the future if we do see exhaust more prominent in future sets. Having a 4/2 that you can just bin and come back with every exhaust ability can be very strong. Having its own exhaust ability for the other ones in the bin can really put a lot of pressure on your opponent. A 4/2 is a very nice stat line for just swinging in mindlessly. But the other one we have, Draconautics Engineer, 2 mana 2/2 Goblin, exhaust for red. Other creatures you control gain haste, put a counter on this, and then exhaust 4, make a 4/4 Dinosaur Dragon. You're mainly playing this for the first one, but that is a very strong effect, especially for aggro decks. doesn't give itself haste, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's a 3/3 for when it kind of wants to swing it on its own.
Notably, first time in quite a while that there's a goblin that's like maybe playable for modern goblins, where one of your main plans is comboing with Conspicuous Snoop. You do need to be able to tap your Snoop to combo with that. So 1 mana giving it haste does help. It's not a very exciting card in general, though. So it's not making any splashes, I don't think. But those goblin enjoyers out there, you can maybe brew with this guy.
Goblin Chagrin. So, sadly to say, Goblins probably isn't going to be a top deck in any format for a while. Mainly, standard and modern, but these are pretty strong effects on some bodies that are castable for aggro decks. So first one we have Howl Squad Heavy, 3 mana 2/3. Start your engines, other goblins control the haste. Beginning of combat on your turn, make a 1/1 red goblin creature. That token attacks this turn if able. And then for max speed, make red for each goblin you control. Once again, start your engines. We don't really know how easy it is to get that max speed, but with the 1-drop break decided, probably won't be that hard.
It certainly helps. Again, for at least modern goblins, which I played a decent amount of, you're definitely not looking to pick up 3 drops. You definitely want stuff lower on the curve than that. So tough card to include. It's not doing anything super novel for the deck either. There's already 3-cost goblins that give haste. So standard goblins keeps getting stuff. We're supposed to go to Lorwyn in a year, which certainly will have goblins in it. If it doesn't, that might be a bit confusing. So I think it's fair to say there'll be goblins from Lorwyn. So maybe standard goblins kicks around if we get some really powerful pieces there, and this can help kind of fill the gaps. It keeps making a goblin token, which will generate some card advantage essentially that way. If you have a lord in play, it will get out of hand really quickly, especially
Foundations.
I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about Rootveld Horde Master from Dominator United, where when your goblins die, you exile the top card of your library, and you can play that if it's a goblin. So even if they're just chumping out your 1/1, you get to threaten card advantage, like further card advantage. So it's a powerful effect for standard if we get the support to play this sort of thing.
Also, I do say there is also especially battles here where you're just pumping with goblins. We have Warlords Call in standard right now.
True.
So just making every goblin coming at 2/2 that deals 1 damage is pretty dangerous, and giving other goblins haste can be pretty strong, especially if you're just
if you're looking to start your engines, burn out Bastronaut in your goblins deck, or even just your aggro deck, is a good way to just get that going right away. Having Menace means that it's going to more easily be able to attack on turn 2 through your opponent's first creature. It's maybe a little understated at 1/1, 2 mana to pump only its power is a little unfortunate. I wish it was 1 mana or +1/+1. But when you do get it to max speed, it gets double strike. Again, with your lords, it's going to be really good. If you need to start your engines, it's going to be a really great way to curve out.
It's a very good card to kind of leave mana open, swing in with it. Either force bad trades or just get your max speed going. Especially with your Howl Squad, you can get like 8 mana. This has double strike. Just pumping this for 4, making it 5/1 double strike menace. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, late game, this will close out games if you can get to that max speed.
And then overclocked machines. Gotta go fast with these guys. Mendicat Core Guidelight is Zorius for a star 3. So for each kind of artifact control, that is its power. And then max speed, whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1. If you do, copies.
Another really powerful payoff for your max speed. Still gonna be maybe tough to get there, but this is also a creature who, if you're playing like a go wide artifact deck, regardless of your max speed, it's going to get a lot of power very quickly. It starts as a floor at 1/3 being an artifact itself, but you're very easily, with cards like Nesting Bot or other stuff, going to be able to get that at 2/3, 3/3 on turn 3, or higher.
It's just, especially with the affinity decks, you have cards like Synthesizer, so getting those 6 drops coming twice, making 2 constructs pretty brutal, making your Thoughtcast Monitor make you 2 bodies, drawing 4 cards is like brutal. So if you can get max speed from Mecha, it can really just take a game away if it's just allowed to kind of just let all your huge bombs come in twice.
Yeah, and Nesting Bot, we have Lethal Demolition in Standard, you have Godolpho Rebirth in Modern, both 1 mana ways, destroy or sacrifice an artifact you control to make 3 bodies. With Nesting Bot, you get a body back after you do that. That body's still an artifact, so you can do it again the same turn or next turn. 4 bodies for the price of 2. You can play like Goblin Bushwhacker style decks. Standard right now has, I think, Jeskai Convoke is the current brand of really go wide. That maybe this can slot into if you want to play things like Lethal Demolition. The start your engines and max speed is an upside. I don't think you're really playing this card for that effect so much, but it's other text on the card.
Yeah. It's a surprisingly very good ability, especially just having artifact for both the bodies. Something we've seen before, so hopefully we can see some more stuff. Here it is again. Orisa Cat and his Royal Entourage. We have Glory's Past. So it has for your engines, it's Orzhov for 3/2. Sacrifice another creature, it's available and activate only once each turn. You have max speed when you sacrifice a non-token, a 2/2 zombie. If this sadly didn't have that activate only once each turn, this is already a pretty good card. Getting that Viscera Seer effect, especially with Surveil, letting you just kind of throw all those cards in the bin. And then getting that max speed on it too is pretty brutal, making your nesting bots give you 3 worth of power whenever it dies, just making it a lot stronger. Of course, it's just actually only once each turn is really brutal, but that's each turn.
Yeah.
So might take a little more time.
Another reason why it would be really nice if start your engines you could take up on once a turn, not just your turn. Like a card like this, especially because you can only sack a creature once a turn with it. But if you have like an aristocrat effect, a drain effect in play, sack a creature on your turn, 1 on your opponent's turn, that's 2 speed. I think, unfortunately for Start Your Engines, I think WotC maybe showed too much restraint designing it. But maybe you can get something to work here. This is a solid sack outlet on a solid body in the right colors. So that max speed might just end up being a little bit of upside when those games go long.
Yeah, so there is that kind of Orzhov Aristocrats deck we've been seeing pop up in Standard. Just having another payoff, another sack outlet to kind of get you to those bombs. It's 2 mana, so I think it's like Bring to Light. The 4 mana sorcery, you can add all your 2 drops and 1 drops. Back.
Yes, I forget exactly what it's called, but yeah, 4 mana sorcery speed.
If you also have multiple copies, you have max speed. When those copies die, this will also make zombies. So if you have say like 2 or 3.
The fact that this is only once a turn on the sacrifice really hurting it for that deck, because it's really nice when you can sack your board, cast that, bring it all back, and maybe even do that more than once and have these really big turns where you can sometimes just 20 your opponent out of nowhere. But Kind of moving on a little bit, Gas Guzzler. It's a 1-drop that starts your engine. Unfortunately, enters tapped. The max speed, pay a black, sack another creature or vehicle, draw a card. It's not the greatest payoff, not the greatest body, but if you're really looking to start your speed quickly, it's a solid option. And maybe not a creature people are going to want to trade with early on, so you might even be able to get that second speed pretty quickly by just sending it at your opponent. If your opponent plays a 2-drop with 2 toughness, they're probably not going to trade with it. So a potential option if you're looking to start your engines quick.
It's probably not the best 1-drop you can play, but if you won't really need that secure ability, and if you're playing that aristocrat deck, you might have 1 or 2 of these, because in those later games when you're just drawing your 1/1s, you're like, I just need to hit the big payoff, that blood wedge into play and start going off. This card can draw you into it. And then Affinity and Beyond.
A lot of affinity cards this set. These 3 are pretty solid ones. Demonic Junker, 6 and a black. It's a 4/3 vehicle. When it enters, for every player, you can destroy a target creature, up to 1, so you don't have to. If you destroy one of your own creatures, the vehicle gets 2 counters, so some potential value there. If you have a random Ornithopter sitting around, not doing anything, and it crews for 2, so this could potentially be turn a 2-power creature into a 6/5. It's pretty good. All these cards have affinity. Anytime you have these kind of cost reducing keywords like affinity, it can be sometimes hard to evaluate them, but they come down really quick sometimes. They're all of these guys are kind of on the higher end of maybe what would make them really busted, probably for the best. But you also have cards like Voyage Home, 5, and Azorius, draw 3 cards, gain 3 life. This is competing with other similar cards like Thoughtcast and Thought Monitor. The extra card is not nothing. Gaining 3 life when you're probably tapping out to draw cards is going to be meaningful upside. You're not losing too much tempo in the form of getting beat down too quick while you're doing this. And another potential option for maybe a slower, more controlling like artifact affinity build, which we have seen a little bit of brewing with. And then we also have Memory Guardian, 4 and a blue. Still affinity, just a 3/4 with flying. I say just, that's going to beat down pretty quick. The 4 generic is kind of where you want to be with affinity or lower, because it is, in Modern at least, really easy for that to cost 1 or 2 mana on turn 2 somewhat consistently. Is this going to keep up with the speed of other creature decks speeding down? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's worth trying. And it's going to add to your artifact count, being an artifact itself. This is the kind of card that has been really good in the past. It's maybe been a long time since then, but all of these, if you're an affinity player, worth looking at, worth brewing with.
And the cool thing is, with Demonic Junker, we have Insecure Iron Eater in Modern right now. It's just having a 7-mana kill spell for 1 that you can just throw at your opponent, can be pretty brutal. And then the Refurbishing Bay that we just saw previously likes big artifacts that cost 1 that you can get for big artifacts that cost 3 mana.
Yeah.
So that is another kind of avenue to pay attention to.
Another reason to be playing black in your affinity builds when Azorius has been kind of the place to be most of the time.
And to kind of round out our preview, Elfco, everyone's favorite. So the big thing to note for Elf decks, mainly in Standard, as the title says, they don't have a good option for Trample. You can pump them up with, Tyvar or whatever effects, but if your opponent has, 2 or 3 bodies to kind of block your huge elves with, you don't really do much. So, getting 3 extra mana with that pump spell to make sure your elves actually can get through can be pretty big. The exhaust ability isn't that much, kind of not be worried about making it into a 5/5. Like, can be actually pretty deadly, especially if you have.
In elves, sometimes you have extra mana sitting around. Maybe you're dirtling a little bit. You can make this a 5/5 with trample, which is not nothing.
It's a beater, and it's probably something the elves deck needed. Just another mana hit to throw into, and hopefully you can kill opponents.
Not a powerhouse, but it's a nice thing to maybe pick up, give it a try, maybe just play a couple copies.
And then these are my pickups. Zahur, Glory's Past. I feel, I hopefully can, get max speed in my games. The Orzhov deck I've been looking at a lot recently. I haven't really done that much standard deckling as of late, but if I can see good placements for that deck with this in it, I may pick it up. The card I'm most excited for is Treacherous Insight. Once again, it's a very good combo card for those fringe decks that I just love playing, and just every good artifacts to kind of bring back. This card, would really like that. But making my Soul Trader loop cost 0 life is a big upside for me. And then Market Back Walker, I am a Scales player, or was until Day of Reckoning came for me, MH3. And hope, I'll probably pick up that, try it out again, and relive my short-lived glory days. And then...
Yeah, to maybe no one's surprise. Mostly what I'm looking at is picking up black cards. The Speed Demon we talked about earlier, I don't think there's much more to say other than it's a win con that draws you cards. Going to be potentially really good top end in black standard decks. I think right now Golgari mid-range, which I'm also looking to grab that Wastewood Verge for, which will be a huge boon to its mana base. Golgari mid-range is moving, I think, more low to the ground in response to some of the new kind of meta decks that have climbed their way up, especially like Esper Pixie. So Speed Demon is maybe going to be sitting around in the collection for a while, but it's something that may come out, make some splashes in the right meta. A card we haven't talked about yet, Intimidation Tactics. Maybe nothing too flashy, kind of at a cursory glance. 1 black sorcery, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an artifact or creature to exile. Pretty normal, kind of like this kind of duress, Thoughtseize, hand disruption effect. It's nice that it exiles the card, so in formats like Modern, when you see that pesky Flage, you don't feel bad like putting it in the graveyard for them, which you almost never want to do with like Thoughtseize. Just put it right to exile.
The Belcher deck we talked about, getting a Belcher and
yeah, or Grinding Station has become a really powerful deck, a really popular deck, making it so that they can't go Underworld Breach, bring back Grinding Station. Means this is potentially a good disruption effect. And something that I don't think we've seen before, this card has cycling. One of the big drawbacks of these hand disruption effects, however powerful they are, on turn 1, on turn 2, when you enter those kind of parts of the game where you're top decking, maybe your opponent is as well, and you draw one of these, and it's just a brick. It's often even worse than a land, depending on the position. Being able to cycle for 3 is huge. So I'll definitely be looking to add some of these to my collection. It's going to be a meta-dependent card for sure. Might appear in some sideboards in Standard, or in the right metas in the main deck in say, Modern right now. Might try to return to some mono-black control in Modern in the coming months. And this is a card I'm looking to test.
And there is a chance we see the Infinity Gauntlet in Modern. So getting, kind of answer to that turn 1 can be pretty important.
Gotta be prepped.
I know.
Buster Sword comes out.
Alright.
Hammer's making a comeback. Aether Spark.
Alright, we've talked too much in the future. We don't need to talk about unfun things like that.
My third eye's opening as we speak.
But thank you all for joining us on this fast speed, high velocity, exhausting Aetherdrift preview, and I hope you all have an amazing day.
Comment, like, subscribe.
Buy stuff at mechagames.ca. Bye!